This video is brought to you by StarCharge, the largest EV charging manufacturer in the world. They are also a provider of residential and commercial battery storage with microgrid solutions. This video is also brought to you by Kempower, the reliable, quick, and scalable EV charging solution for everyone and everywhere.
Hello everyone, welcome to Out of Spec Reviews. I'm Max, you might see me from the Out of Spec Guide channel. I'm joined today by my friend and colleague Coleton from Out of Spec Detailing.
How's it going, guys? Super excited here with the refreshed Model 3. We've also, of course, have Ryan behind the camera with his Model 3 rear-wheel drive pre-refresh.
Yep, and so today what we're going to be doing is having, Ryan drive the new car, see how it compares to his very comparable rear-wheel drive from last year, and then we're going to talk about general impressions. We're going to get outside these cars, talk about the condition, all of that. Keep in mind, we're doing a demo drive. So Coleton, currently this one is, I would say, not quite up to your standards.
Yeah, I couldn't even believe they handed us the keys to this in this state. Nobody was driving it right before us, or so it seemed. We actually showed up quite a bit earlier. We haven't had snow or really wet roads in the past 4 or 5 days, I would say, here in Colorado. This, to me, if you're coming in to drive a brand new vehicle you're considering purchasing, this to me is absolutely not a good look. I can give it an exemption if it's snowing out or the roads are actively nasty, but yeah, I think a little bit more could be done there.
Absolutely. Now, many of you will be familiar with this car from seeing Kyle's videos from it in Europe. However, this is one of the first ones that we're able to drive as consumers in North America. You yourself can go schedule a test drive. However, in Colorado, we're pretty early to it, so we're going to tell you about the big differences we noticed, both the announced ones and any things that come up that we run into. Like, for instance, this US one seems to be running on Hankook tires, not the Michelin rubber that we were seeing in Europe. So let's talk about all the differences, get nerdy with the specs as we like to do here, and dig into the new Model 3 refresh. All right, so let's just start with a walk around on these cars, and there's cosmetic changes that you may have seen online, but we'll walk you through a lot of them. Off the bat, integrated headlights with the fog lights. They're much slimmer, sleeker looking. The overall profile of the car is a little bit more efficient aerodynamically.
Yeah, huge changes here, of course, from the refresh Model 3 to the OG one over here. So Model 3 has looked like this for how many years now, Max?
Since 2017 when it came out.
Yeah, and really nothing has changed other than some interior components. Of course, we've had some things with batteries and different, but it has really looked like this since the day it came out. And it is really nice to see the new Model 3. Of course, everybody's going to have their own opinions on styling, but yeah, a nice new updated look to the vehicle. My personal opinion, I would definitely say it looks more of just like a normal car. It's very subdued, especially on the front end, but seeing it in person, you definitely get a better idea of proportions and things like that. It is odd to me that we don't get any sort of fog lights here. Of course, those are going to be integrated into the headlights, but as you can see on the old Model 3, Ryan, you actually don't even get fog lights on your car, correct? Because it is the rear-wheel drive? Yep, so exactly. But I think best thing we should do, let's just walk around the car, see what's new and different, because there are quite a few changes. So front bumper, of course, totally new. Headlights, totally new. The front trunk, totally new, or the hood area has new fenders on it. You're just starting to see little design differences, but relatively it still looks like a Model 3. We'll take you around this side. Now, Max, I believe you told me the doors were exactly the same from pre-refresh to post-refresh, correct?
Right. If we're comparing the two, the only parts that are actually largely the same are these doors, the piece that runs under them, and this quarter panel. Mostly everything else with the car, like you were saying, Coleton, the bumpers, a lot of the structural elements are actually quite modified.
Yeah, absolutely. It should be noticed, this is a Fremont built one. So we were kind of curious to see, is this going to be a Shanghai built one? Are they going to be built in Fremont? Importantly for me on the Out of Spec Detailing channel, we talk a lot about build quality analysis. And I was really curious to see, because Kyle and Brandon Tesla Flex that actually got to drive the Model 3 refresh over in Europe, Kyle was blown away with the Shanghai built Highland or refreshed Model 3, and he was really anxious to see how this one was. We're not going to do a full build quality analysis. Eventually on the channel when I have one in the shop, we definitely will. Now, Ryan, down the back here, The rear end to me is really one of the biggest changes. Again, very hard to see through this very, very dirty paint. But as you can notice here, brand new taillights here. Even actually the charge port door is completely different here. I do want to point this out. This is already just touching the paint here. Yep. Okay, so totally different door there for sure. Definitely new taillights. We also now get the Tesla script on here instead of just the normal T. It really, to me, at least, Max, looks like a baby Model S, if you will. It's definitely grown up a little bit more and has some new unique lines to it. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. Dimensionally, it is ever so slightly different. This, at least North American one, I believe is 1 inch longer. That's not down to the wheelbase or anything. That's just down to the way they've sculpted the body and everything. I agree with you, Coleton. It is a little bit more Model S-like, a little bit more aero. And it's funny, I've already seen someone down US 36 here in Colorado with the existing Model 3 who replaced the badging with this new Tesla style to make it look like the new one. So already we're seeing that effect where, right, the new one starts to become what people desire, and as subtle as the differences are, they're nice. And I really do like the new taillight design.
Yeah, totally agree. I think the rear end has a very nice, just new style to it. It still looks Model 3, of course, but it definitely has just, it's got more mature and things like that. So I think one of the biggest changes, though, realistically, Max, is interior. And I really want to get Ryan on camera here. Maybe I'll swap with Ryan, but interior has been a big complaint for a lot of folks in Model 3 being not the most premium, and man, oh man, did they really update the refresh here.
Absolutely. So we'll get to the next clip. One more thing I want to touch on before everyone comments, though, the wheels. We can't directly compare today. Ryan has taken his covers off, and of course you can see the beautiful exposed wheel underneath. On this vehicle, it's got the aero caps. It's dusty, it's dirty, as Coleton was explaining. But what you should know is 18-inch and 19-inch across the board wheels have new designs. When the performance of this comes out, I'm expecting that will have some new designs as well. But before we ramble on too long, let's get into the interior and have Ryan and Coleton talk about that.
Okay, so I'm going to start looking at this door, and the first thing that I'm noticing is, looks like interior lighting right here, the ambient lighting, and that's really nice. I like it. Looks like there's some different materials on the door as well, which I think is nice. I don't know if it's necessarily like better or worse in my personal opinion, but I think it still does look nice. Overall functionality, as far as everything goes, this all feels really good. I actually prefer how this door handle opener feels and works. It just seems like a bit more natural of a position and much less likely for people to accidentally press the door handle to open when they're trying to open up the windows. So next I'm going to take a look on the inside, and taking a look at a lot of this material, and I'm seeing a lot of similarities. Up here on the top, I'm seeing a lot of similarities. Looks like a similar type cloth material. Still got, actually, I think this is a soft touch, possibly like a leather type thing. It's actually hard plastic in my car. So slightly better, but it's not something that's, you know, gonna make or break your day. And I'm already seeing that the seat does look different. It's not crazy different, but you can already tell that it looks like there's gonna be ventilation, which of course is something that they've added, and I'm really excited about that. Additionally, actually, I'll just step inside, take a seat. And looking up here at the dash, and it looks remarkably similar. Of course, we've got the new ambient lighting here that I'm really noticing. I really like how that looks. Again, I think that's just a really nice touch. And this fabric right here, I think is nice. It's a nice little touch. They no longer have the wood over here, which is something that I personally really liked. I thought that was a nice touch. I'm a bit bummed to see that they no longer have it. Now, I guess I can move on to the steering wheel, and it looks very similar as far as just overall shape and size. I feel like it's a little bit different just as far as the grips, not anything huge, and of course there's a lot more functionality right here and no stalks back here. We'll touch on that a little bit later and talk about that, but I can press all these buttons right now, and they're all right. They're better than I was fearing. But I would prefer to have stalks, I think, at this point. I think the wheel feels really nice. Overall, it looks like a nice improvement. You can kind of see some sculpting right here, which I think is kind of new. So you can put your thumbs in there. This bottom part as well, it's nice. There's a little hole, some textured material. That all looks nice. Up here, I'm looking at the center console. It looks really, really similar. This is a different material, however, functionally very similar. Yeah, I think this looks really good. A lot of familiar stuff, what I'm seeing. There is no thing to open up this glove box, but otherwise it looks pretty similar. There's one USB port right here. There's actually two of them in my car, unless there's... No, I think that there might only be one USB-C port up here, which I think is an interesting difference. And of course, as I mentioned earlier when we were looking at the seats, one of the big differences is cooled seats, and we've already got them on, so I'm going to put the cool on. I can feel it working. That's really nice. It's only 60 degrees, so it's not that hot right now, but that'll be really nice in the summer once it starts getting really warm. A lot of the functionality of the screen is very similar. It's very snappy, extremely responsive, and that's also true with the previous Model 3 that I personally own. Something that they did change was make the bezels slightly smaller, and they upgraded the connectivity to 5G, so you should have faster internet connection wherever you're going. And one final thing that I want to bring up is the glove box, which is a little bit different. It's now magnetic, so it's a little bit different. Still a similar operation. You press up here and open it with the glove box, but quieter and...
Does seem a little bit smaller for sure to me, Ryan. What do you think?
Yeah, that was something that I'm looking at. It does look a considerable bit smaller, actually.
Really does. Absolutely.
And I do actually, one thing I want to mention / rant about is I really strongly dislike this glove box design. I think that it's very unnecessary to have a button to press it. There's a lot of different ways that you could do it. There's like mechanisms where you can just push it and it'll open, and then to close it, you just push it again. I think it's solving a problem that doesn't need to exist. There's a lot of better ways to do this that doesn't require you going into your screen to open the glove box. Furthering this point, I've actually had this mechanism break and the glove box was entirely unusable. I had to get it repaired, so frustrated that that's still there, but not the end of the world.
So to the back seat now. I am noticing something totally odd here, and man oh man, was that loud. Max just closed the glove box there. That is a very nice sound, but a little loud, I would say. So I do want to make a note, because I am definitely overweight, but I'm quite tall, about 6 feet tall. The headroom in this feels slightly less to me, which is kind of odd. It almost seems like the front of the seats are angled a little bit, and I'm definitely sitting up higher. Like if I were to sit in kind of a normal position, my head is completely in the glass here. So I would say, yeah, rear seat room actually feels worse to me. I would definitely kind of slouch down here if I would, and then that feels definitely a little bit better. The interior of the refreshed Model 3 here to me feels very grown up. To me, it does not feel completely and absolutely different like I really expected it to. It's just when every single little material that you touch in here feels slightly more refined and slightly changed. Max, for example, here on the back of the seat, this used to be a hard, scratchy plastic, now more of a soft touch kind of vegan leather material, which I do appreciate and like. You'll notice, like Ryan was talking about, that side piece basically over here under this area is a lot nicer material. So it's just like every little material they went and kind of revised and just tuned a little bit. The seats I do want to talk about. Now, we do have confirmation that this is very similar to Model S, Model X type material. So it is a little bit different from previous Model 3 and Model Y. I would say, yeah, it definitely feels more like that Model S. I will note from a detailer's perspective, the new Model S and Model X refresh seats definitely get dirtier easier, so I'll be curious to see how this goes on the white optioned interior here. I do like a few accents in here because of the difference between rear wheel drive and long range. So rear wheel drive, Max, if you want to pan over to that door panel there, actually gets cloth in the door there as well as on the dash, where I believe the long range variants get in Alcantara, but I'm not exactly sure about what goes across the dash there. So door handles here, one thing I want to note, this button feels fantastic getting out. It also seems to me that it's a lot bigger and a lot easier for folks that haven't been in Teslas before. Quickly press that and pop the door open. One thing everybody has been doing with these closing the door, man, that feels really, really solid. Max, let's look at the screen back here. Yeah, I honestly would never use this screen. For some people, this may be great. Honestly, my dogs really sit only in the back seat. So I don't know. I don't think they're going to be watching, YouTube and things on here, but it is nice to have functionality of being able to use heated seats here. Interesting here. The middle seat actually does not get heated seats here. It is kind of interesting. You can move this seat forward, which is quite nice. All the way forward. Now plenty of legroom. Another thing I'm noticing here, underneath the seat feels like a lot less footroom than previous pre-refresh Model 3. But again, this material here, like I was talking about, feels a lot nicer. Max, also down here, a lot less plastic. This is all carpet down here, and these areas, especially next to the seat here that were plastic in the pre-refresh, got really, really scratched up. So that's a nice improvement there for sure. Max, what do you think about the back seat?
Yeah, so I haven't spent a ton of time in the existing rear seats of the Model 3, but I will say, as someone who owns a Polestar 2, also what I would say is a sedan with somewhat compromised rear seats, this doesn't feel too bad for me. I do notice, being 6'2", like you said, that it does feel like I don't have that much headroom with the glass roof. Maybe these seats are scalloped a bit more aggressively or raised. I'm not entirely sure. I'm appreciating the ambient lighting a lot in here, and I will say the rear screen, for those who are into playing games and watching Netflix and YouTube on a Tesla, is nice theoretically. I would say though that I feel like ergonomically it would be a nightmare to actually have your kids staring down at the screen. That just like asking to develop neck problems if you ask me, but hey, maybe some people like that. I think the controls, like you were pointing out with the heated seats, are the smartest aspect of it. To me, it feels a bit extra, but hey, I'm not going to complain about having it. Interesting that the rear middle is not heated anymore. But yeah, overall, I would say this is comfortable, and it seems like, Coleton, these are the exact same kind of door pockets as were before? Or
nope,
they're
completely different.
Okay.
Yeah, so you actually pull that out there a little bit, Max. They don't have basically any side protection, so if you put like any sort of little objects in there, they're going to come flying out of the seat. Totally different design there.
Oh.
But I do like the material upgrades. Definitely feel slightly nicer. Max, I want you to sit fully back. Yeah, your head, look at that, is completely in the glass. It feels so much smaller back here, which I'm shocked about. Yeah, what else on the inside here? These lights are a little bit different. So Max, go ahead and touch that. It's a kind of capacitive touch there instead of a really cheap clicky light. But yeah, really just nice, subtle improvements. What do you guys think now? What else should we do?
I think it's about time that we actually drive it. I'm really curious to see what Ryan has to think about it as someone who drives a car with the exact same motor and battery configuration. The improvements they've made to the suspension, to this chassis, all of that, I'm really curious to see how those play out.
Great, let's do it.
Okay, this is my first time driving the Model 3, and wow, rolling onto the pedal, it feels exactly the same as mine. Of course, I'm not going to expect to feel anything too different immediately at these low speeds. It does feel pretty quiet. I do notice that. Oh man, I just went to go touch a stalk that doesn't exist.
It's a very odd feeling, I imagine.
Certainly, yeah.
Coleton and I were noticing, we very briefly drove it before you stepped in, Ryan, for the first time, that yeah, at these low speeds, it's a lot quieter.
It's very quiet here. I think that is considerably quieter than mine at these low speeds. I do think it is actually also noticeably more comfortable. The suspension, I'm really feeling like it's a lot smoother on this smooth ground, and when we do go over bumps, they're damped a lot better, I think.
I'm shocked by the rear legroom here. This is terrible back here. So Ryan, how tall are you?
I'm 5'7". I'm like short, not tall, short.
Okay. I am completely and absolutely crammed in back here. Yes, I'm big. I've sat behind Kyle before in the previous Model 3, and man, oh man, this feels really different. First off, my toes basically do not go underneath the seat here, which I think is a little bit of an odd deal going on there. But the legroom definitely feels way worse, as well as headroom. So, I don't know. These sounds back here, I would say a lot of tire noise. I did not ride in Ryan's Model 3, but I honestly expected it to be quieter so far, and yeah, realistically it seems noisy-ish back here, but not bad.
At the moment, Ryan is running the Nokian Hakkapeliitta R5 EV winter tires on his Model 3. Ryan, you've been very impressed with how quiet they are, but your factory tires were the Michelin Primacy, right?
Yeah, MX-M4 Primacy, I believe is their full name. And honestly, I think the Hakkapeliittas might be a little bit quieter than the OEM tires, which is crazy to say, but I think it's true.
Yeah, so we don't have the recent memory to compare OEM to OEM, but all of us are still noticing tire noise. So it's not like this model has just transcended into being like a Rolls Royce.
Yeah. And over there was a little bit of a firmer bump, and at that point you can tell, like, yes, it's still a Tesla Model 3. It's not a Rolls Royce, but I think it does feel noticeably better than my Model 3, which I'm a little bit surprised about. I thought it would be a lot closer, but I do feel like there is a distinct, quite noticeable difference between the two. If you can drive them back to back, I think you'd be able to, most people would be able to tell a difference.
I can't kind of describe it, but it feels boomy. I almost feel like it's coming from like the rear trunk area, if you will. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of expected it to be a lot quieter, especially back here, because now we have acoustic glass on both front and rear, correct, Max?
Yeah, as Tesla brands it, it's like 360 acoustic glass. It's all of the glass panels, and you're just noticing it's still loud.
Yeah, it's very bassy and boomy, and it almost seems like that's the suspension-wise. I still hear this in Model Y today, so that's a little odd, I would say. But yeah, definitely not as quiet as I expected, to say the least.
Overall, as a front passenger, I'm noticing it's pretty comfortable. These are pretty rough roads we're driving over in Aurora, and it definitely does seem to be like noticeably more compliant. And Ryan, I'm curious, I know you said, off the pedal feels the same, right? This car has down to the same EPA rated range as yours, same LFP battery in this rear wheel drive, basically the same long range battery as far as we know, that's NMC. But here we are in the LFP one with the exact same motor setup, making the same power, same torque. Does it feel any different?
Honestly, as far as powertrain, no, not at all. Not a single bit, which is to be expected because, like you said, it's identical. And honestly, as a whole, I don't think that there's a whole lot that feels different, aside from two things that I actively notice while driving. One, I do think it's noticeably softer and more comfortable with the suspension. And two, I see the ambient lighting. And aside from that, it feels the same as my 2023 Model 3 pre-refresh.
Ryan, do you feel it's noticeably quieter?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of getting that impression. That was an interesting bump there. It felt actually quite good. It just, I really honestly expected it to be a lot quieter than it is. And it still sounds like a Model 3, like tons and tons of road noise. I think the thing, we've been at kind of low speeds here, not hearing a ton of wind noise, of course. But yeah, I would say from wind noise perspective, probably quite a bit better, but tire noise is surprisingly loud, I would say. And we're having this a fresh take coming off of, Nokian Hakkapeliitta R5s. I run a non-EV on both of my Model 3s, and Ryan runs a EV specific one that is quieter. But it's still, it's a little bouncy back here. It's quite interesting. I don't know. The back seat, I'm not loving, to be honest.
I think that's a really interesting perspective. Something that I certainly noticed with my Chevy Bolt when I owned that a few years ago is the front seats were okay, the ride was fine, but for whatever reason, riding in the rear seats always felt so rough, and just every bump felt like you were getting launched out of your seat. So it may have to do with how they're setting up the suspension.
Yeah, and this car does have, that frequency selective suspension that Tesla has talked a lot about that is in part supposed to make this more comfortable depending on the kind of speeds you're traveling over and the kinds of bumps you go over. They're also, I believe, mounting the chassis to the subframe differently. Supposedly, it's a stiffer car. Now, I don't know if there's any way of you to be able to notice that, Ryan, but I suppose that would make this car maybe handle a bit better, especially maybe if they roll out a performance model with a similar chassis, but let's say retuned suspension.
Yeah, I mean, hypothetically, yes. I think the reality is with the rear wheel drive Model 3, there's no track mode. You can't defeat stability control. The car does not want to let you have a whole lot of fun, so to speak. It's pretty aggressive with traction control and making sure that you're staying safe. So I don't know how much you're actually really going to be able to take advantage of a significantly stiffer chassis, for example.
Yeah, perhaps making this vehicle safer. Of course, Model 3 already was rated very well by NHTSA and all of those standards, but maybe this car is even better in crash safety. I think they have made some slight changes to the doors for at least, I think, rear passengers to actually make it safer in side impacts.
Interesting. Okay, folks, I'm now in the back and I am still 5'7", and this is honestly pretty cramped. I'm not quite touching the glass, but it's noticeable. I feel a little bit cramped, a little bit claustrophobic. It's marginally better than the new Prius. However, this is not an upgrade. This is considerably worse than the current Model 3, and I wouldn't really want to be in here for like a 10-hour road trip. For like a few hours, it would be fine, but I would not want to be in this for such a long road trip. And thank you for pointing down there. The feet are another problem. Again, I'm short. I'm 5'7". I've got very small feet. I can't fit them under the seat. I feel like the legroom's a little bit cramped. It's just a little bit surprising and disappointing from the rear seat.
We haven't mentioned it yet. Ventilated seats are nice. They seem to be powerful enough. They're certainly making a difference. It's sunny and warm today.
They're definitely not as loud as I thought they'd be. I remember somebody noticing how loud the cooled seats were. You could definitely hear them turn on, but it's not an annoying hum. One thing I really want to point out, front seat, immediately quieter. Ryan, are you noticing any huge difference there?
Yeah, so in the rear seat, I'm starting to see what you're saying. It's definitely a different acoustic experience. There's a lot more bass. It feels a little boomy, like you were mentioning, almost like there's some weird pressure differentials going on back here, and I did not notice those at all in the front. So I think, at least to me, it noticed like it was a little bit better up front, but back here, definitely I think it's worse.
One thing I am noticing here, Ryan, if you want to point the camera to my knees, the glove box feels a lot smaller, like the dash in general. This way definitely feels a lot smaller. I feel like I have more legroom here, and I would be kind of where I'm at. The seats are definitely substantially more comfortable, I would say. I did feel like when I drove it that I sat slightly higher than in my Model 3 Performance or Model 3 Long Range of last generation, of course. But yeah, the front seems way better to me than the rear. Acoustics, room, things like that. Max, how are you feeling so far driving this? What does like steering feel to you? Does it feel any different?
From my prior Model 3 experience, it to me feels similar. I haven't had deep experience. I, again, drive a Polestar 2. That also, of course, has electronic power steering, as do many cars. And I typically drive with actually a medium to firm setting. So I'd say, I guess the steering feels somewhat soft. Of course, you can configure that. So I haven't messed with that too much yet. But yeah, Coleton just sent me to comfort, and definitely, you know, a lot of play there. Maybe that plays into also, of course, the geometry and the suspension as well. Over those bumps that we just went over, I'm kind of impressed with how it handled that. I would say, you know, my Polestar has the performance pack, meaning it has Olean suspension. So compared to Ryan's Model 3, I've always found the Polestar rides really nicely. Now, riding in Polestars with non-Olean suspension, I've noticed they actually have never been that comfortable. I would say when it comes to that suspension comfort, this new refresh, Highland, whatever you want to call it, seems to kind of bridge that gap, at least when it comes to comfort. We're not sending this around a track today. You can't configure it like you could Oleans. That's not what Tesla's pretending to do here. I think this is just a better suspension for most people. And then when it comes to the other things that I appreciate, like the Polestar 2 being so quiet, this actually feels quieter to me when we are talking about wind and cabin insulation. But like we've all been saying, the tire noise pretty noticeable here. And I would say not that much better than the outgoing Model 3.
To me, it just feels bassy. Ryan, are you still getting that, especially over those big bumps back there?
Certainly, yeah. And like I mentioned, this is giving me a lot of reminiscent of the Chevy Bolt. And in the rear seat, it sounded a lot worse, and the suspension felt a lot harsher, and I'm feeling a lot of similar stuff here. And it was really interesting because when I was in the front and you were talking about some of that bass and boominess and the harshness of the suspension, I didn't fully feel that, and I didn't fully understand it. But back here you do, and it's really quite fascinating how different of a experience it is just a couple feet away from each other.
Of course, we're driving an early one, but it seems like the Tesla Vision system is freaking out at the moment. We're getting all of these
Nope,
warnings.
this is just how they always work.
Oh, that's just Tesla. Okay.
Welcome to Vision only with Tesla. This is my car every single time I get into it. It's just like, oh, park assist degraded, and it's so frustrating. So right now, I think because the car is so completely filthy, again, I can't believe they did that for a demo drive. That's my personal opinion. You guys may be like, it's fine. But like the roads here, it's sunny, it's 60 degrees outside, and yeah, have your cars clean if you're having people to come test drive stuff. Max, kind of punch it, see what you think here.
Well, again, I drive a dual motor car, so not a fair comparison.
Feels totally
perfectly
great.
Quick enough though. Like the 5.8 second, whatever it is, 0 to 60 and Model 3 rear-wheel drive has never been a problem. So I really don't think it's an issue that they left this powertrain untouched. It's fine, as we've seen. It's spectacularly efficient. Battery charging performance, we're all expecting to be the same because again, this is that same LFP battery.
Yep, totally agree there. It is night and day difference, the comfort in the front seat versus the back seat. I could not spend a couple hours in the back seat of this particular car. The feet room is annoying, the headroom is annoying, and the boominess, I can't get over that boominess. And I'm shocked by that because I've heard everybody talk about, oh, it's so much quieter. It's way quieter up front here, but if you have passengers, like I think a lot of Uber, Lyft folks are going to obviously sit in the back, to me it feels like a huge compromise over the outgoing Model 3. So I'm not exactly sure there, but yeah, I mean, the car does, Max, to me feel more mature now. Like it just got a little bit more refinement here and there. I mean, suspension definitely feels different, even being in the passenger seat. It kind of soaks up the bumps. I think Kyle talked about this. It feels more German, how it has, yes, you still feel the bumps, but it comes right back. Whereas some of these Model 3s get very soft and you almost get this kind of wobble going, or the torquing of the rear end, if you will. And yeah, it definitely feels more grown up, but I am noticing way less wind noise. It is just tire and road noise to me is substantially louder than I really expected. And I don't want to make this video just talking, it's so loud, but I'm shocked how loud it is, in all honesty. These should be noted, these are hardware 4 cameras, which, yeah, look pretty darn nice in here.
As we're reversing out here, we've got some trucks pulling out on this road. And Coleton, as you were talking, I was thinking this reminds me a lot of the feel of the Ioniq 6, the other kind of EV sedan, if we're talking about vehicles in this class, because I was kind of impressed with how comfortable that car felt. I would never remotely call the Ioniq 6 a performance car or say it had a very sophisticated suspension or really responsive steering, and yet it seemed like a perfect commuter car. And to me, at least in this rear-wheel drive refresh Model 3, I'm getting that same sensation.
Very, very interesting. You know, one of the things that I kind of want to touch on is, you know, Kyle drove this car and he called it the best car in the world. Now, I can have my own opinions and completely disagree with Kyle. I am not, in all honesty, completely and absolutely blown away with this. Now, recently, I just purchased a pre-refresh Model 3 Performance, and he goes, dude, you are going to regret this. I literally don't regret it at all. This to me feels like a nice upgrade. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, if you have the iPhone 14, if you have the money, yeah, sure, spring for the iPhone 15, but it does not feel just like substantially different to me, that it feels like a completely and absolutely new car. But there are very, very nice refinements to it. That may be a little harsh on the vehicle, but that's just kind of my opinion. Ryan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I 100% agree, and just I'm kind of going to echo the same thing. I think it's a lot of nice upgrades. There's some things that I'd love to have in my car. I'm not bummed or disappointed or wishing that I had this car instead. And honestly, that's kind of what I thought would happen. I really thought that I would be really excited about all the changes in this and all the improvements. And yes, there definitely are improvements, but it's not all improvement, and it's not that big of a difference in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think we really should talk about the elephant in the room here, particularly on the interior, where there is a big potential ergonomic downgrade with this lack of stalks. I'm noticing, again, I'm sure you can get used to this. Keep in mind, I drive a car with Stalks normally, as do all of us at the moment. But to me, I'm just feeling much more hesitant and like at the moment, just unsure of myself because I have to press these buttons for turn signals. I have to press it again to cancel it. It's like BMW turn signals from the early 2010s, but even a little bit stranger. I'm sure, again, you can map your brain and get used to it, but it is a bit different. I think though Coleton could speak the best to this, so let's hear from him about what he thinks of that and the driving experience in general.
All right, so hopping into the driver's seat here. So first off, let's talk about what Max was talking about, ergonomic wise. If you guys have all seen me on the Out of Spec Detailing channel, I have one hand. Now I drive manual vehicles, not a problem for me at all. And one thing that I've been annoyed with Tesla lately is just the lack of stalks. For me, if I own this car, never using the blinkers. I am not going to sit over here, take my right hand off the wheel and do one of these and have to look down and hit it. I watched Ryan immediately get in this car and do this, and that's my first instinct as well. I don't mind the gear selector as much. The gear selector is fine on here. I think that works completely fine. I do like having the wipers switch to here. This actually makes a lot more sense than this button over here, I would say, Ryan. But just not having that initial bam, I need to hit that as a wiper or as a turn signal is just annoying to me. So I'm just going to drive around the car with no blinkers ever. Going over the bumps, yes, it feels slightly better. You still don't feel like you're in, an Audi or a BMW, in my personal opinion. You still have that very Tesla suspension. It feels very wallowy. The steering to me, feels noticeably lighter, especially on and off center here. So when there seems to be a little bit more play to make it a little bit softer and dampened down.
I'm wondering if that has anything to do with it being in comfort steering mode.
It could, but I drive my car in comfort steering.
Gotcha.
Both my performance and my long range, always. Yeah, because to me, I don't like the heavy, overweighted feeling. It just doesn't feel super natural. As we're sitting here and never going to get across, notice I didn't even use my blinkers yet again. Yeah, I don't know. To be honest, I totally expected this car to blow me out of the water and go, I should never have bought my Model 3 Performance, and I am not regretting it an ounce right now. I'm really not. Like, if you're getting a new Model 3, yeah, of course, just get the refreshed one. But to me, it's a hard sell to take owners that, maybe have negative equity in their previous car or don't really need a car to make this huge jump. I just don't feel like it's that massively different. Again, it's such nice little upgrades. Like, I think the interior for me is the biggest improvement. I don't love black interior vehicles, so that may be why I'm like slightly more negative on the interior, because I think the white, I would really be able to see it and compare it to my personal vehicles that I use every single day of the week. But yeah, like it is nice. It's not different enough for me to go like, oh my God, it's just twice the product. It's not. It's like 10 to 15% better.
Yes, I think it'd be, again, silly for someone to upgrade year over year, or even with like a, let's say, 21 or 22 model year 3 to this if you don't have reason to, especially when we consider, guys, that this does not have the tax credit at the moment. Whereas you get a Model Y right now, that's actually cheaper with a tax credit. Now, of course, you may want a sedan, you may want the nice new interior lighting, you may want the new look of the Model 3, subtle as it is, but you're gonna be, at the moment, paying for it unless you're leasing. So like in the US specifically, I think that's really interesting, this vehicle in 2024 having lost that tax credit status. That makes it, a little bit of a harder sell. It's still really, really competitive in its class, but it's a bit tougher now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. I like the previous dash better. The ambient light looks cool, but like, to me, it's not completely and absolutely different where I'm like, oh my God, the interior is amazing. But yeah, I think it's just subtle little things, but there's things that I prefer. I don't like the steering wheel on this at all. The horn, can't even hear it at all because we don't have a horn in this. So just like little touches like that are just, I don't know, so different, but so much the same. Like, it's that right there, it's still wallowy. You know what I mean? Like a Mercedes or an Audi would take that 100% different. You know what I mean? So I don't think it's like that level incredible, but it's just that nice improvement there.
Yeah, it's a good way to set expectations, and they haven't changed the price, at least in the US, on this, aside from it losing tax credits. So it's not like this is getting up there to be with a BMW i5 or even an i4 or anything like that. This is still a pretty affordable car, and it kind of shows in some ways.
There's some nice improvements. I think people are going to like a lot of things about it. I don't think you're going to be dissatisfied purchasing one of these. It's not like that much different to me, though.
Certainly, I can definitely agree with that.
So Coleton and I are driving Ryan's Model 3, and we're just driving back to Tesla of Aurora, and this is the first time we kind of get to see it from the outside in action.
Yeah, it looks pretty good. I just noticed the diffuser there. Lots more aero management going on below the rear bumper. The car from the outside definitely looks like an upgrade to me. I personally am not a huge fan of the front bumper, but man, that rear end, it definitely gives baby Model S vibes.
People who are most hyped for this car were expecting like an upgrade in class. Like, oh, this is going to feel all of a sudden like an EQE.
That's what I expected. I really did. Especially with Kyle. Like, I value Kyle's opinion. To me, this was the most impressive thing, driving them back to back like this. This car does not feel like it is that much different to me. It doesn't feel like that is a huge leap in a generation of Tesla. In my opinion, it is absolutely not. So, I don't know. Maybe that's my opinion, that is not as well versed in, performance driving, handling, and as much as driving and reviewing as Kyle's done. But yeah, just my opinion, it just does not feel that much different. I think it looks phenomenal, though. This view right here looks amazing on the new Model 3. I love the new rear end for sure. From this view right here, it just looks like a normal Model 3. Like, it looks absolutely no different.
Yeah, some of that is down to just being dusty and a bit of a harder profile, but also we are looking at the most similar angle of it in terms of the doors being very identical, the mirrors being similar, B-pillars, these wheels, are the aero caps are so darn dusty you can't notice any design difference. So figured it was worth showing that the trunk is slightly different. Ryan, I believe on the new refresh, this has 2 actuators for the struts as opposed to 1 on your car.
That's right. So I'm excited to see what this is like, to see if it's any different. Not that I've had many problems with mine, but yep, that opens like a trunk. We can definitely see that the opening is different. It seems a little bit better.
All carpet down here.
All carpet. There are also 2 pockets here and here, which is nice. There's only one on one side in the previous Model 3. But otherwise, it's just a black hole of carpet.
Wow, seems like the same height and everything that opens to as yours.
Possibly a little bit lower, but I'm 5'7", it's not a problem for me. Might be a problem for you, though.
All right, Ryan, you stand next to that, and then we're going to go over here. We can park them right next to each other. Great. That gives us a good idea. So close this down. I want to see how nice this goes down.
Pretty smooth.
Wow, really smooth.
Here we are with the old Model 3. A little bit taller, a few inches. For someone taller, it might make more of a difference. For me, doesn't really make a difference.
All right, well, we've wrapped up. We've turned in the new Model 3 refresh. We are back in Ryan's old rear-wheel drive.
The first thing that I'm noticing is there's some distinct differences in the sounds. I'm a bit hesitant to say immediately that it's louder, but it's definitely different frequencies that I'm hearing up in the front seat. I do feel like this feels slightly louder, but it's not a night and day difference.
And that could be totally down to the difference of winter tires, the Nokian Hakkapeliitta R5 EVs you have on here, and the Hankooks that was on the last Model 3. But I mean, to me, in all honesty, like getting back into this, I love this car just as much as I did, if not even more. The seats to me are so much more comfortable. Actually, I don't know about you. I just fit better in these. I also feel like I sit substantially lower in this car, which is weird because you lose a lot of foot space, especially in the rear. So yeah, I don't know. Max, what are your thoughts?
I would say sitting here in the rear that I do have a little bit more space. Again, I'm not super used to Model 3, but it is surprising to me that a newer one has more of a compromised rear, despite it being nicer in those ways, like the ventilated rear seats and that screen, which I have to say I'm just not missing that much here. So I would say it feels fine. I do, even in the back, think that maybe the newer one, I could see how it could be more comfortable over certain kinds of like surfaces, over railroad bumps, over more aggressive stuff. I think I might like that. Like, we just went over that and that felt quite...
So that feels very different then.
Yeah, that feels, I think, pretty harsh in your car, Ryan. I wouldn't say it felt, you know, you noticed it still in the new one, but it did feel kind of damped more, especially in the back. So I like that in the new one, but it is a really, really minor change. Ryan, you had a really good way of putting it off camera of how you compare the like comfort differences between the two.
What I said before was that it feels like up in the front, it feels like it's a 5% improvement, just as far as comfort, road noise, suspension. However, in the rear, it feels like it's 20% worse. So overall, it depends on where you're putting your value on things, but at least to me, it doesn't feel like an entirely great upgrade going from this one to the refresh Model 3. I think that there's definitely some very valid criticisms. And one thing I do want to echo was with the suspension, especially over those railroad tracks, I think that was a really good example, seeing that the refresh Model 3 suspension does feel a good bit better, more sophisticated, able to handle that a bit more smoothly, more comfortably.
The materials in here definitely feel cheaper, I would say. Like, when you start touching everything, definitely, you know, your door materials feel a little bit cheaper in the old Model 3. I like the new materials they did. I think they did a great job, especially in the inside, just refining every single little thing. There's definitely a lot more plastic in, you know, pre-refresh Model 3 versus the new one. So like that upgrade there. But yeah, I mean, it's a facelift, let's be honest. It's not a brand new car. It's not on a new platform. So yeah. Anything else, guys? Because I think we've rambled on way too much in this video. It's, you know, typical long out of spec video. But yeah, I'm shocked, honestly. I really thought this was going to be the car. And yeah, it doesn't feel all that different to me.
Yeah, I think that really sums it up quite well. It's not a bad car. It's, in fact, a really good car. The thing is, the previous Model 3, the one that we're in right now, is also a really good car, so it doesn't feel like that much of an upgrade.
Yep, and I guess we can close this out by saying, you know, there may continue to be inventory discounts on the existing pre-refresh Model 3. It sounds like, from what all our thoughts are, for many folks, those may be worth considering. If you're saving thousands of dollars on a inventory Model 3, you're not going to get the tax credit with any one of these. Well, maybe that's the move, or maybe you lean more towards Model Y. If you'd be curious to see like a comparison of, okay, what's a Model Y versus like the new Model 3 now, maybe that's a video we could do on like Out of Spec Guide or somewhere. Of course, Coleton, people have to look forward to build quality, full analysis from you later on with this vehicle. We'll have plenty more coverage as we get more access to Model 3 in the US. But I think that's a good place to leave it for today.
Absolutely.
Thanks everyone for watching. Stay tuned to Out of Spec Reviews, all the Out of Spec channels, and see you in the next one. Bye.